My husband has just been reborn and says he wants to divorce me and marry his cousin. My mother-in-law was so shocked that she slapped him. Your cousin is already a noble lady in the palace. Do you want to get us all killed by saying such rebellious things? My husband was stunned. He doesn't know that I had been reborn 4 years earlier than he did and had already sent his cousin to the palace. In our past lives, my husband favored his cousin and tried every means to take my life. This time, I want to see if he has the ability to plot against the emperor. When he discovers that he has already been castrated by me, he will be even more surprised. Ding! RoyalStory reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. I tended to my mother-in-law's illness and had breakfast in her room. After the meal, my mother-in-law urged me to go back to rest. If I went back now, wouldn't I be the first to discover my husband's corpse? I held my mother-in-law's hand. No rush, mother. Your feet feel cold at night. I'll sew some sleeping socks for you today. Mother-in-law praised my filial piety repeatedly and lamented about my husband's incompetence. I smiled. Hearing hurried footsteps outside the courtyard, my smile became even more genuine. Unexpectedly, it was my husband, Song Chinemo, who ran in lively. I was startled, clenched my fist, and recalled if there was any mistake with the poison. Song Chinemo just glanced at me lightly and then ran to his mother. Mother, I finally understand. My cousin Wen Jihan is my true lifesaver. Back then, Lu Jiro falsely claimed Jihan's credit, creating a rift between Jihan and me, and schemed to marry me. Now I want to divorce Lu Jiro and marry Wen Jihan. I paused, only to see mother-in-law's face filled with horror. She stood up and slapped Song Chinemo. Mother, you can be angry, but my decision won't change. If I can't marry Wen Jihan, I won't be happy for the rest of my life, Song Chinemo said stubbornly, covering his face. Mother-in-law pointed at Song Chinemo, trembling with anger. All the servants in the room lowered their heads, not daring to make a sound. I quickly walked over to help mother-in-law calm down. Song Chinemo was still oblivious. Lu Jiro, if you hadn't estranged me from Wen Jihan, I would never have looked at you. Pleasing my mother now is useless. Be smart and go apologize to Jihan. Mother-in-law finally caught her breath. Shut up! Mother-in-law glared at Song Chinemo, stomping her feet anxiously. You unfilial son, Wen Jihan has already entered the palace as a noble lady. Do you want to get our whole family killed now? What? Song Chinemo was full of disbelief. This year is only the 7th year of Guangqi. Wen Jihan clearly, because I didn't marry her. Song Chinemo asked. At this point, I was sure Song Chinemo, like me, had been reborn. However, he had been reborn 4 years later than I did. I picked up a vase and smashed it on Song Chinmo's head. Song Chinemo passed out. I lay on my mother-in-law's lap, trembling and crying. Mother-in-law patted my hand and told everyone in the room. The young master had a moment of hysteria. No one should speak of what just happened. The servants all responded, yes. After all, publicly saying he wants to marry emperor's concubine and regretting not doing so for life, if this spreads, even several heads of the Song family wouldn't be enough to chop off. Mother-in-law looked at the unconscious Song Chinemo on the ground, showing deep concern. I murmured, I was just in a hurry. What if something happens to my husband? Mother-in-law sighed, feeling sorry for Song Chinemo, but said that unfilial son deserves it. Thankfully, you knocked him out in time. She looked around and sighed again. Jiro, personally go call the gatekeeper to fetch a doctor and leave the servants here. I nodded immediately, knowing that mother-in-law would still need to warn the servants. I left mother-in-law's courtyard and slowed my steps. I had measured my strike on Song Chinemo, knowing it wouldn't kill him. But I could slow down, let him hurt a bit more and lose more blood, making him weaker. The more he suffers, the happier I am. Just as I was thinking, I saw Song Chinmo's personal servant running hurriedly. I asked, "What's the matter?" The servant found reassurance in me. The young master woke up early this morning, suddenly mumbling the name of that noble lady. Then he asked me what year and month it was, and suddenly ran off. I chased him desperately but couldn't catch up. I darkened my expression. This is serious. Who from his courtyard saw it? I took the servant back to the courtyard, gathered all who heard Song Chinma's nonsense, and cleaned up traces of my attempted murder. Just as I brought the doctor back to mother-in-law's courtyard, Song Chinmo was groggily waking up. He murmured, "Ji Han." Mother-in-law stood up abruptly and slapped him again. I rushed over, grabbed mother-in-law's hand. "Mother, he is already in pain from his wounds. Let's have the doctor check him first." On the surface, I appeared to care deeply for Song Chinmo, but my eyes were full of sarcasm. Over the years, the hatred and resentment between me and Song Chinmo should have ended with his death last night. Unexpectedly, his current life died, but his past life was reincarnated here again. Well then, considering the harm he caused to my family in our past lives, letting him die easily wouldn't satisfy me. Song Chinmo and I were betrothed since childhood. My family sought the protection of his family's dragon bestowing achievements, and his family sought our wealth. Initially, I didn't mind him having an affectionate cousin. Song Chinmo wanted to keep beautiful women. He could have as many as he wanted, as long as he upheld the family honor, gave me the dignity of a wife, and let my family leverage the Song family's prestige in business. After all, among the noble sons in the capital, those as foolish and easily exploited as Song Chinmo were hard to find, even with a lantern. However, Song Chinmo was infatuated with Wen Jihan and wanted to make her his wife, but couldn't let go of my family's wealth. Before our marriage, he and Wen Jihan devised a vicious plan to have mountain bandits kidnap me, ruining my reputation. Once I lost face and was unfit to be his wife, he would magnanimously allow me to bring a large dowry and become his concubine. I turned their plan against them. I found out Wen Jihan claimed to be Song Chinma's childhood lifesaver. So during the mountain bandit raid, I schemed for Wen Jihan to abandon Song Chinmo and escape by herself. Then I provided forged evidence to make Song Chinmo believe I was his true lifesaver from his childhood. Song Chinmo and Wen Jihan became estranged, sent her to a convent, and joyfully married me. After the marriage, I had little affection for Song Chinmo. He could agree to ruin a woman's reputation and discard a previously beloved Wen Jihan so easily, showing he was heartless, ungrateful, and unethical. So, I always guarded against him. But it's easier to dodge a hidden arrow than to avoid a fool. 3 years after our marriage, Song Chinmo rekindled his old flame with Wen Jihan. Witnessing Wen Jihan's 3 years of suffering in solitude, Song Chinmo decided to be the hero who saves the damsel in distress and punishes evil. He planned to kill me, seize my dowry, take over my shops and estates, and marry Wen Jihan as his legitimate wife, ensuring that the child in Wen Jihan's womb would have a noble birthplace. By this time, I had already managed the Song family into an iron fortress. Song Chinmo, Wen Jihan, and Song Chinma's mother took turns scheming against me, but I blocked all their attempts. Unable to overcome me, Song Chinmo suddenly lost his sanity and publicly declared rebellion, uttering many rebellious statements. He even accused my Lu family of funding him and being his co-conspirators in the rebellion. He intended to rely on annihilating 9 generations of our families to ensure mutual destruction with my Lu family. My Lu family suffered greatly and had to sacrifice half of our fortune just to plead with the emperor for a thorough investigation to protect the lives of our entire family. However, Song Chinmo was determined to kill me. After all, he had already contracted syphilis and didn't have long to live. Before his public outcry for rebellion, he had deliberately lived and ate together with plague-infected refugees for several days. When my entire family and Song Chinmo were imprisoned together, we were all infected with the plague. Later, my entire Lu family succumbed to the illness, and our bodies were all burned to ashes, leaving no bones behind. Filled with immense hatred, I was reborn to the night of my wedding with Song Chinmo. After some probing, I discovered that I was the only one reborn. So, from that moment, I began my scheming. For 4 whole years, just when I had completed all my plans for revenge and poisoned Song Chinmo to death, he unexpectedly came back to life. Well, good debts and grievances have their roots. This time, I'll let him understand why he must die. I looked at the still dazed Song Chinmo. The doctor bandaged Song Chinma's head wound and softly said to my mother-in-law, "It's just a superficial wound. He only needs to rest. But, young Master Song must stop taking those dangerous medicines, and he needs to relax more, his pulse is becoming undetectable." My mother-in-law's face darkened. I immediately turned away to wipe my tears, covering my smiling lips with a handkerchief. The doctor couldn't detect the fatal poison in Song Chinamo. After a year and a half of rebirth, the concubines I arranged for Song Chinamo gave birth to children one after another, rendering him useless. So, I made Song Chinamo impotent. Back then, Song Chinamo was frantic, seeking excitement with one beauty after another, and consulting countless doctors. Initially, he discreetly took dangerous medicines for fear of ruining his reputation. Later, desperate for a cure, he sought all kinds of secret remedies and even believed in itinerant alchemists' pill crafting. Taking too many strange secret remedies and pills had long since ruined his body, his pulse so chaotic that even the imperial physician dared not claim to cure him. If Song Chinamo cared about himself at all right now, he should carefully ask what the doctor meant. Unfortunately, Song Chinamo was very sensitive about his impotence and would fly into a rage, even beating a concubine to death once when it was mentioned. Therefore, the doctor only dared to hint subtly, and even my mother-in-law didn't dare to bring up this taboo subject with Song Chinamo, only asking me privately to keep an eye on him. Impatiently, Song Chinamo waved the doctor away. "Get out, get out." "Mother, I have something to ask you." Before the imperial physician could close the door, Song Chinamo asked, "Mother, Jihan." I covered my mouth. "Dear, speak with caution. You cannot call a noblewoman by her maiden name." Song Chinamo glared at me venomously. "Lu Jiro, you vile woman, how dare you?" Slap! My mother-in-law gave Song Chinamo another slap. Song Chinamo widened his eyes and asked, "Mother, why do you keep hitting me today?" I quickly walked to the door, checked outside, and shook my head at my mother-in-law, indicating that no one was there. Only then did my mother-in-law scold, "Song Chinamo, I have tolerated all the disgrace you bring to the Song family. But when Jihan has entered the palace, no matter how much you can't let go of her, you must. Do you want your mother to lose her head too?" Song Chinamo suddenly sat up straight. "Entered the palace?" Jihan was clearly waiting for me. She said she would wait for me all her life. I haven't had the chance to be good to her. How did this happen? Mother, tell me why. I found it amusing. When Song Chinamo first became impotent, the servant I placed by his side suggested he should look at various beauties more often, thinking it might trigger a reaction. Song Chinamo listened, visiting every brothel, and I would occasionally give him antidotes, making him alternately better and worse. He thought that looking at beauties was effective, and became increasingly intimate with courtesans. During this time, I let Wen Jihan return to the Song family and watch Song Chinamo whisper sweet nothings to many other beauties. Heartbroken, and aware of Song Chinma's impotence, Wen Jihan weighed the pros and cons and, knowing the emperor had his eye on her, decisively entered the palace. A person who can't even handle household strife participating in palace intrigue, oh, the depth of the palace, it's like the sea once you enter. My mother-in-law pinched me, signaling for me to explain. I pretended to say, "Dear, Jihan." Song Chinamo glared at me. "It must be you, you vile woman. You schemed against us before the wedding, and now Jihan didn't wait for me. It must be your doing. Lu Jiro, did you also come back to life? What have you done since you were reborn?" Struggling, Song Chinamo got off the bed. "Mother, I was reborn. Listen to me, Lu Jiro will destroy our whole family." I hugged my mother-in-law, trembling and fearful. Rebirth, isn't that from the story that the Taoist who swindled 3,000 gold from husband wrote? Mother-in-law, has he gone mad from trying to cure his impotence? Song Chinamo was still trying to warn my mother-in-law against me. Terrified, my mother-in-law stumbled and ran out. "Jiro, you shouldn't speak so directly. Help! Someone help!" Before his rebirth, if anyone mentioned his impotence, Song Chinamo would go into a frenzy and beat them. I followed closely behind my mother-in-law to the door, and while she instructed the servant, I turned back and said to Song Chinamo, "Regardless of Wen Jihan's situation, Song Chinamo, you are already a eunuch in this life. Enjoy the surprise I've given you." The servant quickly locked the door and stood guard with a thick stick. Seeing my mother-in-law's pale face, I mumbled, "What's gotten into my husband today, another bout of madness?" Inside the room, Song Chinamo let out a high-pitched scream. "Why? How can this be? How can I be unable to? No, it's impossible." His voice was hysterical. My mother-in-law trembled. "Jiro, I thought you were steady, but the moment you spoke, you reopened Chinma's wound, making me have to hide out here. Also, Chinmo just mentioned you. Just then, the sound of a vase crashing to the ground came from inside. My mother-in-law's face changed, my green-glazed vase. I couldn't help but give a sarcastic smile. My husband was in my mother-in-law's room, smashing all her things. For the past few years, I've been treating my mother-in-law with the best food and care. The Song family used to have status but was not wealthy, living an ostentatious but financially strapped life. It was only when I arrived that my mother-in-law truly enjoyed a life of luxury. It's said that it is easy to go from frugality to extravagance but hard to go back to frugality from extravagance. The sound of objects smashing continued inside the room, and my mother-in-law's face grew more wrinkled as she stomped her feet nervously. I softly said, "Mother, your son is more irritable this time. If he's just smashing things, even if he smashes the entire room, the entire estate, we can just live a plain life with him. But if he keeps spewing blasphemous words, we're all going to get beheaded." At my mention of plain living, my mother-in-law sighed repeatedly. She gritted her teeth. Chinmo is confused. He must be confined. Or else, if his words are overheard, we are all in danger. Jiro, you must not be soft-hearted. Two strong martial attendants rushed in, holding blankets. Song Chinmo screamed, outrageous, "Let go of me." Shortly after, Song Chinmo's voice disappeared. While my mother-in-law was distressed by the mess, I took the opportunity to wipe a handkerchief in the place where her pet lynx-like cat usually relieved itself. Then, I stuffed it into Song Chinmo's mouth. Song Chinmo retched until tears came to his eyes, glaring at me fiercely. His hands and feet were bound by the attendants, now lying there like a fish on a chopping board, only managing to twist his body slightly, utterly powerless. I shook my head. Dear, had I known earlier, I wouldn't have gone to buy that glassware. That fake Taoist wouldn't have had the chance to deceive you. My mother-in-law lightly coughed. A few days ago, I heard that a ship at D-City port was bringing back a cargo of precious items, so I decided to pick out a birthday gift for my mother-in-law. Before leaving, I asked her to watch over Song Chinmo. She agreed wholeheartedly. Then, as soon as I left the capital, her favorite theater troupe performed a new play she couldn't resist. My mother-in-law was busy watching the play, and the fake Taoist took the opportunity to deceive Song Chinmo. I'd planned that if Song Chinmo died from the fake Taoist's elixirs, the blame wouldn't fall on me. Fearing that the Song family members would accuse her of indulging in comfort and neglecting Song Chinmo, my mother-in-law wouldn't dare report the fake Taoist to the authorities. Those with hidden motives naturally stand together to uphold appearances. Digging deeper would expose their own faults. So, simply blinding my mother-in-law with luxury wasn't enough. I needed her to see herself as an accomplice in Song Chinmo's death. My mother-in-law sighed. Chinmo, the entire Song family, your dozen or so children, all still need to survive. Don't blame me for being heartless. I'll release you once you've calmed down. Song Chinmo's eyes widened further. In our past life, he and I had only 2 children, and later when Jihan was pregnant but never gave birth. My mother-in-law turned her face aside. Someone, take the young master back to his room and confine him. Simply locking him in a room wasn't enough. Song Chinmo had to die to be truly restrained. I gave him a provocative smile. I tearfully spoke to my mother-in-law. Mother, in a few days, it will be noble Lady Jihan's birthday. Perhaps that's why my husband suddenly went mad. I intend to use the credit I've accumulated as a merchant to appeal to the Empress, hoping she will allow noble Lady Jihan to visit once. No. My mother-in-law was shocked. Absolutely not. Since reincarnating, I've perfected the art of maintaining appearances. Everyone inside and outside the residence knows that despite Song Chinmo's impotence, I love him as if under a spell. Now, my mother-in-law is terrified that I might take any chance to reunite Song Chinmo with Wen Jihan. So, she has ordered me not to visit Song Chinmo, moving him from his comfortable quarters to the side room of the ancestral hall for confinement. That evening, I carried a pot of medicine to the ancestral hall. Upon seeing me, Song Chinmo squirmed. In our past life, to prevent a plague from spreading, all those who died from illness were cremated. My mother hadn't entirely passed away when the fire started. Sitting up in agony, she struggled even more helplessly and painfully than Song Chinmo. So, this time, I poured the entire pot of medicine into Song Chinma's mouth. Blood blisters quickly formed in his throat. Song Chinmo retched continuously, the veins on his neck bulging, but he could only make hoarse sounds. He had lost his voice. I wouldn't give him another chance to speak. I feared he'd go mad again. Such a person, when desperate, will drag everyone down to hell with him. So, killing him directly was the safest way for me. Even if he didn't die immediately, I'd render him speechless, paralyzed, and blind. Only his ears would remain, to hear about all the things I'd done to him over the years. Incapable of resisting or voicing his despair. I deliberately acted affectionate so my mother-in-law would confine Song Chinmo to the ancestral hall. The side room there was usually deserted and accidentally home to a nest of venomous ants. I had given Song Chinmo ant venom mixed with honey water. Ants were already crawling on him. Looking at the ants, I said, Song Chinmo, when Jihan was intentionally sent to the palace by me. She genuinely loved you. Now, she's alone inside the palace, reduced to the lowest rank of noble lady, without family or favor, subject to everyone's torment. Last winter, she was punished to wash clothes with cold water until ice formed. It was truly miserable. Song Chinmo clenched his hand, raising it to hit me. I didn't hesitate, grabbing a wooden stick and striking hard. Song Chinmo fell to the ground in pain. I smiled, kneel and confess your sins, and I'll tell you how when Jihan ended up in the palace. The truth would surely break his heart. But Song Chinmo, having just reincarnated, knew nothing. With no choice but to listen to me in torment, he had no options left. He knelt down shakily. I pulled out 2 memorial tablets from my sleeve. Song Chinma's face showed a hint of confusion. On the tablets were the names of my 2 children from my past life, Rongyu and Junkai. After being reborn, I could save everyone who died unjustly because of Song Chinmo, except my 2 children. Song Chinmo kept kowtowing. In my heart, I said, Rongyu, Junkai, what your father owes you, I will make him pay with his life. Now you can be at peace and reincarnate. Perhaps Song Chinmo also felt guilty and kept kneeling for a very long time. After a long time, I untied his wrists. He picked up a pen and paper and wrote, Jiro, I was wrong in the past, but you shouldn't have left Jihan no way to live. If you... I had no interest in hearing his nonsense. I yanked away his pen. Song Chinmo, I drugged you to make you impotent. You are no longer a man. When Jihan has also entered the palace, there is no possibility for you two in this life. She indeed has been waiting for you in a nunnery, but I arranged for you to have courtesan concubines, so you had no time to care for her. Feeling heartbroken, she joined the palace voluntarily. Oh, and she knows you're impotent. You've not only lost her love, but you've also lost all dignity in her eyes. Song Chinmo couldn't believe it and checked his lower body. Without a pen, he dipped his fingers in the blood from his throat, sometimes writing that I was a venomous woman, sometimes writing Jihan's name, sometimes asking about the impotence. There were too many bad news, he was overwhelmed, and the blood was hardly enough. I smiled. Before you were reborn, you had tried many methods to cure your impotence. Now, everyone in the capital knows you can't do it. Song Chinmo became more agitated. I had to use a stick to help him calm down. When he first came back to life, even if he heard he was impotent, he still thought it could be cured. But now, I've shattered all his hopes. I made him truly feel as if struck by lightning. He cried bitterly, using his fingers to write insults at me. I continued, your reputation is also ruined. Shortly after marriage, you forced many concubines, visiting brothels daily. Such absurdity, the historians have written in the records to mock you. Later, you became impotent, eating toad and drinking gold juice to cure it, becoming a laughingstock. Yes, the historian have detailed that too. Historians are upright and hard to bribe. So I helped his daughter who married a heartless man divorce and have a new life, but I remained obsessed, always in love with Song Chinmo. This made the historian infuriated, mocking Song Chinmo fiercely in his records. I also secretly hired people to write many pamphlets, detailing Song Chinma's ridiculous treatment methods. Anyway, before and after Song Chinma's death, countless people would know he ate excrement. I watched as Song Chinemo, pale-faced, scratched his throat, mocking him. Song Chinemo, now you've made a name for yourself in history. Song Chinemo once had hopes for fame. In my past life, from the time before our marriage, I thought I would manage the household, network with noble women, and help Song Chinemo rise smoothly. After all, the higher he went, the more our Lu family's influence would grow. Even later, when he wanted to tarnish my reputation. After marriage, I still did what I had to, letting him enjoy quite a favorable period. This life, I still remember the impoverished scholars who rose to fame overnight in the past life, so I befriended them in advance. And relying on foresight, I gained the Empress's favor. My support grew, no longer relying solely on attaching to Song Chinemo. He, however, was left with being used by me as his only value. Before, others would say my Lu family was reaching too high for him, but in the past 4 years, the situation reversed. Everyone said Song Chinemo was dragging me down. I looked compassionately at the disheveled Song Chinemo. When you were reborn today, you must have thought that rebirth would surely let you trample me underfoot. How foolish you are. I was reborn 4 years earlier than you. I've exacted all my revenge on you. The person you love, your reputation, your body, I've destroyed it all. Even if I hadn't poisoned you and killed you, you wouldn't have been reborn here. Song Chinemo pointed at me trembling, with a look of wanting to kill me. I sneered, that's good, let you see my revenge with your own eyes. Song Chinemo still wanted to say something, but several ants had already crawled to his mouth along the honeyed soup. Song Chinmo's eyes widened in horror. In the past life, Song Chinemo deliberately infected us with a plague, causing rashes over the whole body, itching unbearably, even scratching until bleeding couldn't stop the itch. Patients would unknowingly scratch themselves all over, where the rashes pus touched would induce more rashes, even worse than smallpox. So, after being reborn, I read many books to find this kind of poisonous ant that, when it bit people, would make them itch unbearably and cause sores. I said happily, this sore looks familiar, right? After you die, doctors will say you were infected with the plague. Your body will be burnt clean. There will be no bones left. In the future, your dozens of sons will have nowhere to pay respects to you. You will make the Song family lose all face, and no one in the Song family will be willing to set up a tomb to worship you. Song Chinemo made guttural sounds from his throat, struggling painfully. Can't stand it already? To die in both body and name was the end you chose in your past life. I leaned down, tightening my grip on the stick in my hand, learning from past mistakes, I won't let you live long. I smashed Song Chinmo's wrist. He could never write again. Actually, it's a bit regrettable. I was curious to see what he would say after learning everything I did. But if he could still send messages out, I would have to live in fear, sleepless every night. I poured more honeyed water on Song Chinemo, then left at a leisurely pace. The next morning, I went to plead with my mother-in-law again. Mother, my husband hasn't eaten for a day, he must have calmed down by now and won't speak nonsense about the palace anymore, please let him out. Mother-in-law stared at the simple porridge and side dishes on the table, rubbing her temples. No, Giraud, just go back. She instructed the servants again, keep a close eye, don't let the young madam and young masters get close to the ancestral hall. I could only walk away, looking back every few steps, hearing my mother-in-law instruct the servants to bring some mountain delicacies. As a dutiful daughter-in-law, every day I saw my mother-in-law, I always advised her to eat lightly, drink less, not eat cold food in summer, and avoid spicy food in winter. In this way, leaving delicious food uneaten while denying it to her, if she wants to indulge, she must give up the rules for me of greeting her every morning and evening. I smiled slightly and returned to the courtyard, pretending to be distressed. Before long, my best friend, the historian's daughter Gucia, came over with a group of other ladies. Gucia's husband and his concubine bribed the midwife, intending for Gucia to die in childbirth. I saved her and helped her punish the scoundrel and wicked woman, so she felt a kinship with me. She didn't remarry and instead followed me to open a shop. Nowadays, everyone knows that a few days ago, Song Chinemo spent a fortune on elixirs while I was away. Today, it was supposed to be dividend day at the shop, but I said I had something to do and wouldn't go out. Naturally, she was worried about me and brought many friends to see me. Xia advised, Giraud, Song Chinmo's impotence should count as one of the crimes for divorce according to the 7 rules. You should separate from him. I shook my head. My husband took the elixir and spoke nonsense. My mother-in-law locked him up for a whole day and night. I'm really worried that he might starve. Xia anxiously said, why can't you see the reality? At that moment, a sharp scream came from the ancestral hall. I immediately ran out the door. Something must happen to my husband. Xia and the group hurried after me. I pursed my lips, somewhat looking forward to seeing how the popular storybooks would depict this incident. In recent years, folk stories about Song Chinemo have been very popular. I don't even need to spend money to have people write them anymore. Even candidates rushing to the capital for exams try to compose the sharpest satire about Song Chinemo, which impresses the noble ladies seeking suitors. So there are always those willing to trample on him for fame and fortune. As far as I know, some among the friends here today have written several storybooks. Mother-in-law tried to dismiss them using family matters as an excuse. But the friends all pretended not to understand and stood behind me unanimously. My eyes were only on Song Chinemo. Mother-in-law was in such a rage, and I simply shouted, Dear, you are so pitiful, my heart aches for you. Song Chinemo was covered in blisters and ants. The servants couldn't clean them off no matter what and had to throw a basin of water on him. Song Chinemo looked miserable but couldn't speak. By then, those present gradually pieced together the truth. Song Chinemo always hid elixirs everywhere. He had hidden one with a pot of honey in the ancestral hall. Last night, he knocked over the honey pot, attracting the ants and bringing disaster upon himself. Mother-in-law sighed, what a sin. Seeing me, she still felt for her son and was heartbroken. I lowered my eyes. If he had stayed in his own courtyard, he wouldn't have suffered. Who could have guessed that there'd be ants in the secluded ancestral hall? Mother-in-law immediately closed her mouth. After all, it was she who locked her son in the ancestral hall. This time, the doctor examined him and said with difficulty, Young master's throat is also bitten by ants, and their venom is strong. I fear he might not be able to speak again. Mother-in-law was momentarily stunned but then showed a relaxed smile. Song Chinemo always stared at mother-in-law, and now, seeing this, he yelled furiously, Ah, ah. I supported Song Chinemo and whispered, Even your mother has given up on you. I sent the doctor away and sent Xia and the others off after they had enough fun. Mother-in-law couldn't hide the joy in her voice. Given the situation, Chinemo losing his voice is heaven's will. Jiro, don't grieve too much, just take good care of him. I responded with a yes. I took Song Chinemo back to the room, looking down on him. How does it feel to await death? One after another, concubines came to see Song Chinemo, but none dared to take care of him. After all, ever since he'd been completely impotent, his temper had turned extremely aggressive. This time, Song Chinemo saw his dozen children. His eyes lit up. I mocked, these children will grow up only to call me mother, thanking me for feeding and clothing them. They will despise your absurd behavior that brought them suffering. By the way, the other day, I said my side branches wanted to adopt 2 children. All of your concubines came to me, desperate to have their children remove your surname and sever their connection with you. What's the use of countless offspring? No one acknowledges you, no one worships you, and your progeny ends as if you never had any. Song Chinemo couldn't speak or write, he could only glare at me. I laughed heartily. Outside, my 2 children said, Mother, we are back. I opened the door, Sons, you've returned from your grandmother's house. Did you have fun? The 2 sons hugged my waist, Mother, we were happy, but then we heard father caused trouble again. No matter. Song Chinemo suddenly twisted his body and fell off the bed. I soothed the 2 children and personally went over to support him. Yes, the 2 children are not yours. I was grateful to be reborn on the day of our wedding. I hated Song Chinemo to the core and couldn't bear to consummate the marriage or bear sons and daughters for him. Besides, I feared his extreme and wicked nature. Old sayings go, the dragon begets dragon, and the phoenix begets phoenix. I feared that even if I carefully taught them, the children would naturally take after Song Chinemo. So, while Song Chinemo was indulging in brothels and entertainment houses, I carefully selected a suitable man and had the children. Strangely, even though he had many children already, he was resolutely set on divorcing me when he first reborn. Now knowing the 2 children were not his, he is still furious. Indeed, what a temper. I smiled. Haoran, Lin Tian, your father is about to die. The 2 children, just turned 3, already very sensible, said, Mother, you suffered before, but now without father, your good days have finally come. Mother, father being alive was always a burden. Song Chinemo had long become a burden and a source of trouble for everyone. Song Chinemo shouted excitedly about something. I calmed him down. Don't worry, if you die, I will immediately have Wen Jihan buried with you. Song Chinemo glared at me with eyes that seemed like he wanted to eat me alive. I tossed the 1,000-character classic that my children were learning to read at him. He raised his swollen, pus-filled fingers, grimacing in pain, but still gritting his teeth to flip through the book. I looked at the characters pointed by his finger. Evil woman, do not harm Jihan. I chuckled. I'm no saint. I sympathized with Wen Jihan for being an orphan, having no choice but to rely on Song Chinemo. So, in my past life, before getting married, I arranged a meeting with her and solemnly promised that if she wanted to be the main wife, I would help her find a good husband and give her a dowry. She said she did not want to marry someone else. Therefore, I prepared properties and shops for her as gifts to support her after my wedding, intending to give them to her during the concubine acceptance ceremony. But she devised a vicious plan to ruin my reputation, leaving me no way out. Later, after rekindling their romance, she conspired with a midwife to kill me during childbirth. I remembered who that midwife was, and in this life, when I intended to deal with her, I found out that she was delivering Gu Xia's baby, which allowed me to save Xia's life. This time, I sent Wen Jihan into the palace. Competing for favor in the palace was far more ruthless than in the household. However, the current empress is tolerant, and as long as Wen Jihan kept her head down, she could still live a life of relative comfort. But last year's palace banquet, she deliberately spilled wine on me, planning to frame me for having an affair with a palace guard when I changed clothes. She resented me for not fully supporting her in vying for favor, for only seeking noble titles for myself, and feared I might reveal her past affair with Song Chinemo. I looked at Song Chinemo. Wen Jihan has wanted to kill you for a long time. If you die, she will only be happy that no one knows about her past. You didn't stay chaste for her when you were healthy, so who is this deep affection for now that you have no way out? Song Chinmo's ant poison was becoming increasingly severe, and he could only cling to life until Wen Jihan's birthday. These days, stories about him were spreading even more. One of the friends who visited me with Xia that day was a talented woman who illustrated over a dozen vivid images of Song Chinmo being bitten by ants for a storybook. The illustrated booklet sold out immediately after its release. I specifically bought a few copies for Song Chinmo to see. He was so angry it seemed like his lungs would explode. My mother-in-law also saw the booklet and was so ashamed that she didn't want to go out for several days. She even secretly went to the opera house and accidentally fell and broke her leg. I asked the empress for a favor, allowing Wen Jihan to leave the palace to visit my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law was both scared and angry but didn't dare to disobey the empress. I affectionately said, "Mother-in-law, I cannot let my husband die with regrets. But don't let noble Lady Jihan know about his condition, lest she worry and slip up." My mother-in-law nodded. It was clear she had always known about the affair between Song Chinmo and Wen Jihan before their marriage. I smiled slightly and had Song Chinmo, who was barely alive, brought out. He hunched his shoulders, trying to hide his pustules. But Wen Jihan was still horrified, even turning away to retch lightly. Seeing Wen Jihan's reaction, Song Chinmo shed tears. He stared at her, mouthing her name despite the presence of the palace maids and eunuchs. My mother-in-law coughed desperately, while Wen Jihan was visibly uncomfortable and fidgety. Song Chinmo refused to retract his gaze. I deliberately whispered jealously. "My husband was delirious the past few days and kept calling your name." I didn't expect that today would be the same. Wen Jihan stiffened even more. I didn't know if Song Chinmo was expressing love uncontrollably before his death or if, like in our past lives, he was pulling someone down with him. In any case, Wen Jihan dealt with him first. I said my mother-in-law had been coughing non-stop, worrying about her, and wanted to escort her back to her room to rest personally. My mother-in-law kept pinching me. "Giraud, are you insane? How could you let them meet alone? My mother-in-law was too afraid of the eunuchs and maids overhearing to speak loudly. I ignored her. After settling my mother-in-law and returning to the front hall, Wen Jihan stood there in fear. Just now, Song Chinemo suddenly fell and died. You killed him. I insisted on reporting to the authorities. Wen Jihan didn't know that the empress had given me another favor. She heard that I desperately wanted to test poisons on myself for Song Chinemo, so she arranged for palace doctors to examine Song Chinemo. The palace doctors had just left as Wen Jihan's carriage arrived at the Song residence. The doctor said Song Chinemo could no longer move and had consumed too many medicinal pills, poisoning himself. So, how could he possibly fall from his wheelchair on his own? Wen Jihan had no defense. Moreover, I had a coroner examine the body and confirmed that Song Chinemo died of asphyxiation. Only the scented powder on Wen Jihan's handkerchief contained a lingering fragrance in his mouth and nose. The year Wen Jihan stayed at a nunnery, she accidentally learned a unique perfuming technique. The emperor liked her scent so much that she refused to share it, expelling all the servants while she made and scented the perfume in secret. Wen Jihan was placed under house arrest. Song Chinemo had not yet been buried. Zhao Fenghua reported that Song Chinmo's wounds resembled the symptoms of a plague he encountered while on a mission in T-City, and the trickster who deceived Song Chinemo spoke with a T-City accent. In my past life, after the flood in T-City, there was an outbreak of disease. And Song Chinemo deliberately let the plague spread into the capital, causing much suffering among the people. This time, I calculated against the corrupt T-City magistrate who embezzled both the dike construction and disaster relief funds, and donated extra money to ensure the flood control dams in T-City and surrounding areas were completed on schedule. Despite this year's heavier rainfall, the dam prevented flooding, and any outbreak of disease was contained within a small area. I had already arranged for a doctor to prepare a remedy for it. Zhao Fenghua, one of the poor scholars I once assisted, is from T-City, which I protected from the floods and helped suppress the epidemic in time. He was more than willing to use the excuse of epidemic prevention to petition for the burning of Song Chinmo's body. Thanks to the illustrations of Song Chinmo's skin ulcers by a talented artist, the emperor approved the request. The empress mentioned that I had always been deeply devoted to Song Chinemo, so the emperor specially bestowed some treasures from the inner treasury to comfort me. The rewards were quite generous because Zhao Fenghua suggested that all those who had come into contact with Song Chinemo should remain at home in quarantine for 10 days to observe for any signs of illness. Therefore, I, my mother-in-law, all of Song Chinmo's children, and even all the members of the Song family could not attend Song Chinmo's final farewell. As I said, Song Chinemo would turn to ashes, leaving only a cursed name. My mother-in-law was in despair for several days before she tried to make amends with me. Her own son was dead, and she had no choice but to rely on me. I, however, had a sudden change of heart. I accused my mother-in-law of being unkind and also charged Song Chinemo and Wen Jihan with premarital adultery, conspiring with bandits, and tarnishing my reputation. I wrote a blood letter, filled with tears and accusations, saying I could not believe my beloved husband harbored such evil thoughts before marriage. Even though he was dead, I begged for a divorce. The evidence was, of course, the love letters I found between him and Wen Jihan, the portrait he drew of her, and the tokens of their communication with the bandits I discovered while sorting through my deceased husband's belongings. Anything related to Song Chinemo always attracted attention. So many people knew about noble Lady Jihan's infidelity that the emperor was furious. A thorough investigation quickly found a bandit who had escaped years ago, and he testified against Wen Jihan. Wen Jihan was sentenced to death. Since she had come into contact with Song Chinemo, even touching his sores, Zhao Fenghua dutifully petitioned that Wen Jihan should also be cremated to prevent any disease. The emperor agreed, and as the empress recalled when she first married the crown prince, someone had also attempted to compromise her chastity. No woman appreciates such schemes. When I heard that Wen Jihan had turned to charred bones, I finally laughed. After all, I was reborn, and after I had poisoned Song Chinemo, he too was reborn. There was no guarantee that Wen Jihan, who was part of this love-hate saga, wouldn't be reborn too. So I went to great lengths to ensure she died completely, that even if she were reborn, she could do nothing. The empress, sympathizing with me, granted me a divorce from the Song family. In her desperation, my mother-in-law suffered a stroke. She had already broken her leg, and now half of her body was paralyzed, needing assistance even to eat. However, without my support of luxury and riches, the Song family's limited funds were not enough to cover her medical expenses. At this moment, I declared righteously that I would still take care of my mother-in-law and Song Chinma's concubine's children. In reality, I went to inform my mother-in-law, "Mother, thank you for specially placing Song Chinmo in the ancestral hall." She finally recognized my true nature. That night, she set fire to the Song family ancestral hall, burning herself along with Song Chinma's remains. And the secret passage I had created when renovating the Song family's residence, completely destroying all evidence. For years after, I raised Howren and Lin Tian on my own, and they grew up well, gradually erasing the memory that their father was Song Chinmo. I continued the royal merchant trade with my experiences from my past life, gaining a first-mover advantage. Most of the money I earned was donated to water conservancy projects or used to buy herbs for the poor. For Song Chinma's children, I supported them in their academic or vocational pursuits based on their talents, though we were not particularly close, nor did we bear any resentment. I permitted Song Chinma's concubines to remarry or to work alongside me if they chose. After my divorce, I grew closer to Guxia, and we encouraged women who had been wronged to seek divorce. At the very least, they should see through their husband's character to avoid being deceived. As I grew older, many people invited me to spring and autumn banquets to judge the character of young men and women. I lived to the age of 90, a long life. As I closed my eyes, I seemed to hear someone say, "Lu Jiro saved countless disaster victims, it was worth giving her the foresight to change her fate." I vaguely remembered that after Song Chinmo caused my entire Lu family to fall ill, my parents offered to test the medicine themselves. We donated all our hoarded medicinal herbs. In the end, despite the medicine's failure, we donated all our silver and requested the government to continue treating the epidemic victims. We even asked that our bodies be burned after death to stop the spread. Rebirth? Foresight? No matter, I've lived this life to the fullest.